Hello and welcome to the Becoming Home podcast. I'm Joe.
And I'm Charlene. Our goal is to create safe space for growth and healing using healthy conversations that bridge generational gaps. In episode 2 of the Becoming Home podcast, thinking about something new, we're talking about external validation versus our self-worth and finding that personal value from within. We also hit on working through the trauma waves that sometimes come up. Sometimes when we have deep trauma in our past, we have these waves of emotion and just how to work through that and really find our center.
And when you're going through those moments, it can be really hard to know where to find your identity. So we're going to talk through that as well. We're going to talk through the learning curves that we go through in this process and how we define success, how important it is to tackle the who before the do. And we'll talk about more in that as well.
Yeah, it was a really good episode. In episode 3, it actually gets pretty emotional. We dig deep into identity and what role, if any, God plays in our desire to get into something new, to start something new. It's a pretty emotional episode. So after you finish up today, definitely head over to episode 3 and dive into that with us. For now, enjoy episode 2 of the Becoming Home podcast, Something New. Like, how did you make that shift from, oh, she thinks I'm this, and kind of getting caught up in what someone else thinks, to moving into a place of peace and calm, like, oh, okay, we're just not the right fit. Like, how did you make that move? How did you make that shift?
I think it was a mixture of the previous work that I've done, just like I've reached for a lot of external validation in my life. So I've had to do a lot of work of I'm enough as I am. And I'm enough because God says I'm enough. And it's just that over and over and over and over and over for years and years and years and years of just repeating those things to yourself. And I obviously still struggle with that. It's not second nature for me to be like, oh, I'm enough. Like, you really have to work for it. And it's not easy. It takes a lot of reminders. It takes a lot of bad days to get to a place where you remember second nature. Oh, I'm awesome and I'm enough. So I sat in the seat of, oh my gosh, this really sucks. She thinks I'm horrible. I sat in that for a good, probably like a week. And I think afterwards I kind of went back to our messages and I kind of started reading through them again. And the language that she chose to use was just really aggressive. And it was like she was trying to, it just seemed really clear to me after I went back and took some time that she was really clearly trying to coerce me into doing her business thing. She wants to make money too, and she wants to sell her thing, and she wants to get this thing rolling, and maybe she's short on bills this month and she's trying to make her quota or whatever. Maybe that was her motivation and I just didn't know it. But I just kind of started reading. I was like, she sounds desperate. She sounds angry. She sounds aggressive. And I wasn't being that way towards her. I was being really honest with where I was at. So I was like, oh, I don't think it was me. The things that she's saying just don't align with what I was saying. It's like she was talking to somebody totally different. And it's kind of taking yourself out of the picture and being like, okay, pretend that it's not all my fault for a second. And let's read this through fresh eyes. And what comes up. And we're just not right.
Yeah.
It's just not the right time right now.
I love that you share the process. Like, okay, what happens initially, like my first reaction is like, right? That's how we explain it. Blah. That's the very technical term for how we react when adversity comes, right? Blah. So, okay, so we had the moment, we had the meltdown, we had all the, insecurities come to the surface, and we had all maybe it echoed something that you had heard over and over, in your past or, whatever. And so we did that thing. And then it's almost like it's like a wave, like if we can just ride that wave out and kind of let it come to its, not conclusion, but to its low point, I guess, because waves up and down, right? So if we can let it kind of calm down, give it time and space, honor the journey of that wave and let it come to a natural, like, don't add anything to it. Like, she's right, I'm a wretched creature, like, don't add anything to it. Let's just let it do its thing. Observe my own feelings as it's going through. And some of those feelings are coming from my own thoughts that, maybe I am kind of inserting some of my own thoughts, or maybe she is triggering some things in me that I had even forgotten that were there. Or, like my experience where my emotions were in my hips. I wasn't like consciously aware of them. It was likely old stories or trauma or whatever that had stored somewhere in my body, and the process of working with my body brought it up and out. But it's that wave, and it's that calming space you finally make it into, and then it's like, okay, let's consider another alternative. Let's consider a different outcome. Let's consider a different possibility of what could be going on here that doesn't equate with I'm a horrible person. I'm not ready to do anything big. I'm not, I'm not a genius, right? Like all these things. And I love that you rode the wave. You had all the freak out moments internally or otherwise. And then you were able to come back to it with like rational thought and then like intellect and, sort of balancing that emotional and intellectual and what you know to be true. And the fact that you've put in the time and the effort of working to sit in your true identity, like to re-identify yourself with what is true.
Yeah.
And what is true is love, right? Like you were created in love. You were created to love others. You were created to be loved by others. That is at the core of life and our identity and what pushes us through life, what draws us into new life. And you were able to come to that place just through, allowing the darkness even in. Like I have such appreciation for light and dark, like these dark moments. They're just moments of, I don't know, unknowing or
even learning.
Yeah, there is darkness in learning. I think learning shows us a bit of darkness, and I think that can be part of what is so scary, right? Like having to learn something new, knowing there's this learning curve, and like being scared of that. Like that learning curve shows us what we don't know. And for some of us, there's a lot of trauma behind that. Like, you don't know, you aren't smart enough, you aren't good enough, you aren't,
Right.
Talk about that learning curve a little bit. How do you approach the learning curve and the fear behind coming face to face with the truth is, I don't know XYZ, but I want to get beyond what that little barrier is into something that I'm passionate about or I do want to accomplish in life. And I know I have to learn some things. How do you... Because what you did in the last example was you talked about something that had already happened, right? Like you experienced something, you had an encounter with some external voice that was like, you're not good enough or you're not this or that. But like thinking about the learning curve, like to me, that's kind of looking the other direction, right? Like turning almost and being like, okay, there's this new thing. I'm not listening to somebody else now. Now I'm thinking about this new thing and I understand that I am going to need to learn some stuff. So like, is that hard for you? I know somebody mentioned that how they dealt with the learning curve. We'll get into their comments in a second, I think, but.
Yeah, I feel like I'm not very good at taking one bite of the elephant at a time. That's something I've just never been good at my whole life is like, I just want to do it all now, whether it comes to like, reorganizing my closet. Everything's going to come out of the closet. It's going to be around my room in a mess.
Yeah.
And I think that learning something new, I'm very much the same. I'm like, okay, great. And I like dive in head first. And then it's like I'm sitting in the middle of a room with all this information piled around me. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was too much. And I'm like, what do I even do? So I struggle between that and then just going without learning anything.
Yeah.
Because I know, hey, if I really take the time to do it, I will talk myself out of it. So a lot of times I'm just like, all right, let's just go. And then I go without fully looking into it. And I'm like, okay, that is more than I expected. And I have to say, though, that is one of the best things about marriage is that Chris is such a thinker and a researcher. He saves me from myself a lot of times because I'll be in there and I'm like, all right, ready to dive. And he's like, oh, well, did you know this, and this about this thing? Because that's how he gets into things, is he learns all about it before he even begins. But that doesn't talk himself out of it. That encourages him to go for it. So he's able to, maybe, but he's able to help me reel back a little bit. And say, hey, did you know this, and this about the thing that you want to do? I'm like, oh, I had no idea. So it helps me learn a little bit without taking away the whole excitement of the possibility. It really helps me when I don't do my own research. If I am able to lean on him a little bit to help me, I just need a few little details and then I'm good. Because if I feel that it's right, then I know I need to dive. And it just helps me to learn along the way rather than try to learn everything at once or not learning anything at all. Like, let me just pick it up little by little, like pick up little pieces. So honestly, for myself, like going in blind is one of the best things I can do.
Yeah. It's like what you don't know won't scare you, you know?
Yeah.
Like, I think I have a real tendency. I'm the same as Chris as far as like I want to research, I want to know all the things. Where we derail or differ is I do get overwhelmed and I'm like, oh, okay.
Well, that was a lot.
Too many things. I can't do it. So it's like, where do I begin? Right. And that was another one of the comments in our little poll of what's challenging starting something new was, where do I start? Yeah. You know, like there's all these, when we're thinking about doing something new and we start to learn, those of us who are researchers, we're unpacking, we're doing, we go to YouTubeversity and, we talk to everybody who's in, we network and we do all the things and we gather up all this information. And then it's almost like there's two groups of people. One person will be like, oh, like me, like, oh God, that's too much. I can't do it. And then there's the other person who's not really fazed by that. They just are like, okay, well, let's just take one thing at a time. Let's just go do it. And then, so for the researchers, who have all the information, but they get overwhelmed, not knowing where to start, like I don't know. I think what you guys have taught me is like, just do the thing. Like, I think Christopher said that, like, when we were first starting, because that is the exact journey I took in this podcast thing was once you and I had that discussion that, okay, yeah, let's do this thing. Boom. I kicked into research mode and I was researching equipment. I'm researching, like software to use. I'm researching the cost of things. I'm researching how to set up a studio and like lighting and cameras and angles and like all the technical. It was a rabbit hole, girl, like hours and hours and hours and hours. And I got to the place I really did start to overwhelm myself with all the details. And I was like, I don't know which one's more important. Which thing do I have to implement first, right? And like I had so much information, I didn't know how to organize it almost. And you guys came over one day and I don't remember the course of the conversation, but I just remember the moment. Chris was like, yeah, just do it. It was the Amazon shopping cart.
Oh my gosh.
That was the moment because I had probably I'd done all this research. I'm like, okay, we're going to go with that mic. We're going to go with that light. We're going to go with that color, like all the things, right? I had made certain decisions, but I was so afraid to and I put all this stuff in my cart on Amazon. I was so afraid to hit the buy now button or the confirm purchase or whatever. And I think there was 2 or 3 times Chris was like, so did you place the order? I was like, no, because I was thinking about this and I think I might want to change that. And he's like, just hit the button. Essentially, just place the order. He's like, we're going to learn as we go. And I think that was so valuable to me. And you made this comment in what you just said, was that there's so much power in having a support system and having someone there to kind of either bounce an idea off of, or someone to just kind of nudge you off the edge, right? But if we don't handle that moment of fear first, like if we don't take everything we just talked about, limiting beliefs and thinking we're going to fail from the get-go, like if that's the real starting point, right? Like we'll have an idea and we can research the heck out of it, but if we don't believe we can actually do something and do something well or be successful, and how do we define successful, right? Like different people will define it different ways, whether it's, my mom made this comment to me, well, I hope this is successful, because, this whole past year and a half, I've been trying different things and not having success, right? Because my end goal is to be able to, create a different way of bringing income, that I can do something I love and make money doing it. Like that's the ultimate goal, right? Like that's the end game or success marker or whatever, and so all these things that I've kind of been chasing after and going after and experiencing and trying new things for a year and a half, and still haven't been able to like make money and sustain myself full time doing that. It's like that's the benchmark of success, I guess, and so when my mom said that, I was like, huh. So I had to have this moment of like redefining success. So like, where do we really begin? You can begin with all the research. You can begin with, figuring out all the things you need to learn and, kind of look at the path and take all the notes and write all the things down. But in the end, like none of that's going to matter if you don't have some kind of belief in yourself that you can actually do the things.
Absolutely.
And you guys brought this quote today. What was it? Go ahead and share it.
Who before do?
Yeah. So Craig Groeschel, our pastor, says who before do. Tell me more. Like, have you guys talked much about that at home, or... Because you seemed really familiar and you kind of lit up a little bit when you heard Chris say that.
Yeah, so it's tied to a Christmas present that I gave him, which is why it's like kind of special, because it's part of a book that Craig's written called The Power to Change. And he preached a whole series about learning how to, like, if you really want to make like a substantial change to yourself, there's just really important things you have to do. And he was talking about just the small habits. And if you want to do like this really big thing, great, but you got to start at square one, and square one is who you are. And one of the biggest examples of that Chris talks about a lot is, say you want to be like a generous person. Instead of thinking, I want to be generous, or, I want to be generous now, but I'm not yet. And, instead I'm actually kind of selfish and, I'm not really the person I want to be. It's, I am a generous person. I will be a generous person. Today, I'm a generous person. And that causes your brain to suddenly be like, oh, we're generous. And you just kind of start making these generous decisions because you've changed how you believe in yourself and how you think about yourself. It's a whole mindset shift, rather than like, okay, I'm going to get up at 8 a.m. every day. I'm going to make my bed. I'm going to brush my teeth. I'll be completely ready for my day at 9 a.m. every day. And this is how I'm going to get there. And it's, instead of like creating this monotonous habit tracker, or, all these little things, like people have all of these like crazy things that will like, help you be successful. But instead of starting with the action, it's starting with the person who's acting. Who do I want to be? Well, then I am that person. If I want to be, super strong, I'm a gym rat. time to go buy a gym membership today. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's creating this identity before you create an action list. So you can sit with yourself first and be, create who you want to be first rather than
mind.
And it then creates this person who wants to do the things in order to get there.
Yeah, because what we believe about ourselves is what we will behave about with ourselves and with others, right? So if we have this belief that we are a POS, then of course we're going to behave like a POS, and if we believe we're going to get fired from a job, or if we believe we're going to fail at a business venture, okay, well, how do you behave otherwise?
Yeah.
If that's what you believe, like if you think anything else will happen, you're either delusional or you're banking on some kind of weird luck, which, I guess luck happens. I'm not sure how I feel about luck, but, like, I think there are certain times in your life when you're like in the right place at the right time. Like, I get that, but you wouldn't have ever been at the right place at the right time if you hadn't networked, or if you hadn't, you know what I mean, been thinking about something. I listened to this, Steve Harvey, has all these, like, there's all on the internet, there's all these reels, that Steve Harvey does all these little motivational talks or whatever to his audience members when they're not taping. And it brought me to tears this morning. And it was just, he was talking about the imagination and how, like, somebody was, it was the one where he's like, somebody was on the phone one time, the old one that had a cord connected to the wall, and they walked as far as they could go, and they were stuck there, and they thought, I really just want to go outside and do the thing while I'm on the phone. And now look, you can do that. You can go outside and stay on the phone call because somebody in their imagination thought of life on the phone, not connected to the wall. And so many other things. Somebody was tired of walking, so now we have cars. Somebody was tired of driving, now we have planes. Somebody was tired of whatever, and now we have something else because their imagination kicked in and they started to dream about that. And he was talking about how, like, our imaginations are these moments where God has put new ideas into us and given us inspiration for what could be. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Becoming Home podcast, where we're helping bridge generational gaps through healthy, healing conversations. Hey, Joe, where can folks go to connect with you?
Go ahead and head over to my Instagram page. You can find me at Committing to Change. That would be at committing_2_change. And you can DM me, we can have a conversation, or you can just follow along on my journey. How about you, Mom?
Yeah, if people want to connect with me, you can get to me through my website, fullyabundantlife.com. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Let me know how we can serve you. If you have any questions about anything in any of our episodes, we're happy to reach out to you and spend some time talking and chatting. So head on over to fullyabundantlife.com for me, or Instagram for Joe. Thanks so much for being here. We can't wait to see you next time. Bye.